So I've learned to be humble about analyzing speeches like this because the country often catches on to things that those of us in Washington might not sift the way the country does. When the president listed things that he thought were extravagant examples of wasteful spending, those of us around this table might say, well, that's not going to be enough, even if you cut all that to balance the budget, which is $840 billion out of balance. But Americans will hear it and say, wait a minute, those things sound wasteful to me. Sounds like Elon Musk and the president are on to something. There was also tremendous emotive power in several parts of the speech that I think will resonate across the country. Whether it's Laken Riley slain, her mother and sister, or Mark and his mother Malphine Fogel rescued or brought back from Russia, or a Border Patrol agent, Roberto Ortiz, or Stephanie Diller, the surviving spouse of a slain New York City police officer. Those things carry emotional weight, not only in the moment, but probably inevitably in the pass-around social media dissection of this speech. I keep my eyes and ears tuned to emotional moments like that that often jump over the instantaneous Beltway analysis.
The media and our friends in the Democrat Party kept saying we needed new legislation, we must have legislation to secure the border. But it turned out that all we really needed was a new president.
How they gonna snatch it back, Michael, when they holding up bingo or auction signs?
I was gonna say, well, thank you, Simone.
Can we talk about it?
The bingo signs were killing me. I don't know who thought up the bingo signs, but they should be fired.
Michael, this is an indictment, in my opinion, on the Democratic leadership.
Welcome back to the Unregulated podcast. This is episode number 220 here on Ash Wednesday, March 5th. I am your co-host who is grounded in Florida, Tom Pyle.
Oh, yeah, this is where I say I'm your co-host, is Mike McKenna.
And we have a really special show today. Auditioning to replace Mike is a dear friend, a former colleague, and podcaster, economist extraordinaire by the name of Bob Murphy. Bob, introduce yourself to the crowd and tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
Thanks for having me, Tom. Good to be here, Mike. Yeah, I spent several years. I'm an economist, and one of my prior hats was I was the economist here at Institute for Energy Research, so a lot of good memories there. Doing a lot on the economics of climate change, and really all I did was go and actually read the reports and just say, no, they don't say what the media is saying or the Democrats are saying these reports say. So maybe we'll get into some more of that later. Right now, I am a senior fellow with the Mises Institute that specializes in what's called Austrian economics, and I am a chief economist at Infinio, which is a financial tech company.
And Bob, why don't you plug your podcast for us as well?
Sure thing. So I have the Bob Murphy Show, and the other two that I host are the Human Action Podcast, which focuses on Austrian economics, and the InFi Podcast, which is all about like blockchain technology as it's used in the financial sector.
Very good. Well, Bob, it's great that you're back here in the AEA offices, and it's a real treat to have you. Major Garrett gave an analysis of the big speech last night, the big, beautiful speech. He connected with folks, according to Major. And I don't know if I want to praise Ronald Reagan for bringing in the whole, regular
you do
people
not.
thing.
You do not.
or I do not, because I'll tell you, it was fine when it was like one or two people, but it's getting a little bit.
I mean, seriously, are there any other survivors we're gonna roll out there? I mean, hey, everybody, look, this woman's husband died. Everybody give him a big round of applause for dying, fans. I mean, it's kind of ghoulish at a certain point.
And of course, the line of the evening was President Trump's riff on immigration. That we didn't really need legislation after all, did we, folks?
Can I ask you a different question? How long has Major Garrett been a major? I mean, isn't it time for him to get promoted?
I don't, unless he changes his name, I don't think that's.
Is he any relation to Major Ogilvy down at Alabama?
All right. And then last and finally on the clips this week, when you lose MSNBC, you know you lost the night. There is no doubt about it. That was quite a show with the bingo signs and Al Green doing his thing. So,
by the way, I loved his jazz stylings. I'm sorry he got thrown off the house floor.
Anyway, Bob, any thoughts on the speech, or did you not watch?
I was traveling. I caught probably half of it. I mean, I understand why Mike is having their reaction. At some point, it does seem a bit contrived, and like it's because putting people in an impossible position. Yeah, we got to not clap. Well, I guess some people did exercise that option, but yeah, I do appreciate that, and I think, again, Trump's just a funny guy. Like, I think people, he's just, I don't think people appreciate that enough. And I think that's a large part of his success is he's just a funny guy, just getting up there riffing.
Yeah, he didn't go off script as much as he normally does. And thankfully, because it was already like 90 plus minutes long. So, all right. Any announcements, gang? I've got one or two. Mike?
I want to, say happy birthday to my sister who actually had a birthday. It was Monday. So that's good. And yeah, that's it for me.
All right. Well, I want to give a little update on my cousin. Great news. He's moved out of the ICU, is already walking around, and the docs say that he will probably go home at least by the beginning of next week, but possibly sooner. So thanks for all who sent out some well wishes to me on that one. And then lastly, for me, I'd like to read a section of the president's announcement today on Ash Wednesday. I thought it was pretty good.
Do.
What?
Go ahead. But I got to tell you, I'll tell you what I'm going to say.
I know what you're going to say. You always
go ahead.
Say. This Ash Wednesday, we join in prayer with the tens of millions of American Catholics and other Christians beginning the holy season of Lent, a time of spiritual anticipation of the passion, death, and resurrection of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. We offer you our best wishes for a prayerful and enriching Lenten season. May Almighty God bless you, and may He continue to bless the United States of America. So the non-Catholic,
you can tell that wasn't written by an actual Catholic, because literally no one ever calls them American Catholics. Nobody. It's terrible.
That is a good point.
It's terrible. It's terrible. Look,
I would just note that I don't believe that in any of Joe Biden, the Catholic Joe Biden's messages to the American people, did he reference Jesus Christ. So
I get it. All I'm going to tell you is that there was a certain author who put the Ash Wednesday proclamations to bed 5 years ago. Everybody else is measured against that and found wanting.
And would you enlighten us, please?
Yeah. It's one of the three guys on this here podcast right now wrote it, and it was awesome. And you know what?
If I have to dig that,
I know it wasn't me, so I've narrowed it down to you and Tom.
I was going to say it's
I don't write anything, Bob. You know that from working together.
So
therefore,
we're kind of down to the one.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for me. Bob, you have any announcements? Other than why did you agree to sign up to do this?
Yeah, this is an unusual podcast. I did listen to some. I thought I knew what I was getting into, but no, it's good. I'm strapped in. I'm ready. It's like you get in a roller coaster, and once it's up, nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, a lot of people describe it as just a recording of our usual lunches that we have. So
true. All
right, this happened in 1770. On this day in 1770.
The Boston Massacre.
Boom, you nailed it. In 1770, on this day, a mob of American colonists protesting British occupation taunted British soldiers guarding the customs house in Boston. The soldiers fired into the crowd, killing 5 colonists and sparking outrage. And they say it was a snowball, I think, that was thrown that set the thing off. So.
Yeah, and nobody was found guilty because they had John Adams as their defense lawyer, and he was good.
He was good. Got a bunch of heat for that, but I'm glad he did it. So, all right, 1946. This happened in 1946 on this day. This will be a little bit harder for you because it could be any one of the many things that happened in Europe.
The formation of NATO. That was 1947.
Yeah. On this day, a gentleman named Winston Churchill delivered a speech at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, warning against
Iron Curtain,
Soviet expansionism and calling for a closer alliance between the U.S. and Great Britain. The speech, which coined the term Iron Curtain, was well received by U.S. officials, but criticized by the Soviet Union as warmongering.
Who? The who?
The Soviet Union.
We don't care about countries that aren't there anymore. Let's move along.
Lastly, in 1982, I usually don't do births or deaths, but I thought this was worth mentioning.
March 5th in 1982, huh? Ted Kennedy.
John Belushi.
What's the difference?
Passed away on this day.
That's gonna get me in trouble.
All right, let's talk more about last night.
Hold on for a second. We have one more of this date in history.
All right, fire it up.
1963.
Bay of Pigs.
Country music.
Tammy Wynette.
Close. Patsy Cline.
Oh, she passed away as well
today. Yeah, it was a plane crash. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. I think I read that in my research. All right, let's talk about the address a little bit more, shall we?
What are our choices?
Breaking more records, the longest presidential address in history. I repeat.
Was it really?
Really?
Yes, that's being dubbed now. What was the longest? What was the longest? All right, let's break it. Let's break it. Let's break the record, shall we? So, anyway, I thought that the star of the show was not Donald Trump. I thought it was that kid, DJ Daniels.
Was that the kid they gave a badge to because he had cancer? Yeah.
Yes. That was very, very cool.
Yeah.
So, I want to play a clip too from him. I guess he cut a video for the White House.
But you want to know the craziest part? Because my mom bathed me and my brothers all together, and out of nowhere I locked up, and then my dad was calling my name, and I started going to the slow thing, and he said stop playing with me, and I then I started to act, I ain't gonna lie, I started to act slow, and then as soon as he said that, we was speeding all the way, running lights, going to the hospital, and then next thing you know, I was seizing on the table. They said, "No, we're gonna have to go in his brain tonight." Ever since then, I had 13 brain surgeries, and that's how many times my personality has changed. And that's something that you don't hear from a terminally ill child. They had 5 months to live. I'm gonna keep on going until my gas tanks run out. And that's when God calls you home. You never know when God's gonna call you home. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my dad. I know he's pretty proud of me, and I'm pretty proud of him too. And I'd like to thank President Trump, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here today.
What a kid, man.
He fits right in with the Trump motif, man. He just why use 5 words if you can use 40?
He's pretty sharp though, you know? Kind of gets his lot. So anyways, the internet say that Mr. Daniels is a constituent of none other than Representative Al Green. So
you're kidding me.
No, he's from the district.
That's embarrassing.
Yeah, it was crazy. So, and then of course, let's get into some policy, shall we? Here's one more clip to set this up.
They're about protecting the soul of our country. Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again, and it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly. There'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. It won't be much. No, you're not. Oh.
What say you, Bob?
So yeah, just real quickly on this stuff. There are a lot of people that we know, Tom, like, libertarian purist types that like, oh my God, this is Econ 101. And the thing is, I'm not saying Trump himself, went and did a bunch of economic research and whatever, but there is a whole field in economics called like optimal tariff theory. And, it's not zero. Okay. So my point is simply, given the federal government needs to raise revenue, the proposals, especially if they lower income taxes or, use this in lieu of, having the income tax rates go back up, when the other legislation expires. I mean, it's not demonstrably stupid, right? So there's people saying that this is just dumb guy stuff. So I think there's that element. And like Stephen Moran is the guy Trump nominated to be the head of the Council for Economic Advisors. He had a whole 40-page document he released, I think, back in November, just talking about how you could use tariffs to kind of rebalance global trade and whatever. So there's a lot of stuff going on, like with the dollar being the global reserve currency. And so that artificially strengthens the dollar. So it makes it hard for our exporters to export, so that, causes trade deficits. So there's a lot of different things packed into this. And so, again, I'm not saying Trump himself is a master of economic theory, but there are people on his team that understand, given that, there's a populist clamor for let's have tariffs and, make China pay for it, whatever, that's not as crazy as it sounds. There's a way you could coherently have an economic plan that has higher tariffs as one element in that I would take that plan over the status quo. So again, does that mean that's what's going to happen in practice? I don't know, but the idea that just, these guys don't know anything, this is just raising taxes, like it's more subtle than that. And a lot of the people around Trump know it's more subtle than that.
Yeah, I agree. And I know this because I listened to a couple of your podcasts as well, where you were talking about this with, was it Josh Hendrickson?
Yep.
Yeah, that you were discussing. And that's why I brought it up in part, because it sounds to me like first of all, I don't think it's a terrible thing to have a conversation about tariffs, because it's not one-sided, right? I mean, there is a case to be made that we have a lot of our stuff is tariffed for economic purposes and things like that, right?
Right. In general, yeah, the rest of the world has much higher tariffs against the U.S. than vice versa. And so this idea that, we're deviating from the global order or something, and Trump is, thumbing his nose at our allies, that's not, I get why they would say that, and that makes sense, and it fits in with the caricature they're painting of him, but that's just not accurate. It's more that, as an economist, other things equal, yes, lower taxes, I'm in favor of. Tariff is a tax. So if the other countries want to tax imports, that doesn't mean we should do the same thing to us if it's a dumb policy. But it is not the case that everybody else has one set of rules and we're violating it. No, we have had much lower tariffs in general than the rest of the world, even like Europe and whatever.
Yeah, and I've noticed that the free traders in the Trump world, like Steve Moore and Kudlow, are sort of, the line that they're taking is, taken as a whole. If you take Trump's economic plan as a whole, deregulation, favorable tax environment, tax cuts, reductions in government spending, then these conditions will more than offset the impacts of the tariffs, or might blunt the pain from the price increases from tariffs. And overall, that's good for us because we're getting more money from tariffs and we're getting all this other good stuff. Assuming, of course, that Congress actually has a tax bill,
right?
Which Mike, our co-host here, has given us a 30% chance, or is it higher or lower these days from your perspective?
I haven't put a number on it yet. I think this is fantasy talk.
Which part?
That we're going to get a bunch of money from tariffs. We're not going to get a bunch of money from tariffs. It's not going to happen. It is the Doge of the revenue side of the tax thing. Everyone's like, "Hey, we'll get $1 trillion from tariffs." There's no way. There's just no way. Not going to happen that way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Mike that it's some of the stuff Trump has said made it sound like, we're just going to get rid of the income tax and just replace it with tariff, and that's crazy because the bases are so different. And also the thing with tariffs is, like, if you're thinking, the point of it is to get people to buy domestically, well, then you don't get the revenue from it, right? Like, they have to actually keep importing. So there is a sort of built-in mechanism where if you try to turn the dial up too high on the tariff, you hit the Laffer curve earlier, to put it in those terms.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like selling citizenship, right? That's not going to happen either. We're not going to get $5 billion. We're not going to get $1 trillion.
5 million. The gold visa.
We're not going to get $1 trillion off of that.
Everything's gold. Everything's gold with this guy.
That's not true.
Rob, you must be happy.
Some of us platinum. Oh yeah.
All right. Well, our position, of course, is that we are less interested in weighing in on this issue from the perspective of whether we should tariff steel or lumber or this or that. We have a firm position, however, that we should wall off energy. The basic energy stuff, the oil, the gas, the electricity, and everything else. In part because, we don't import a lot from China, for example, so it won't really disrupt what he's trying to do with China. But also, if you look at the North American Energy Platform, it's been built over the last 50 years under the premise that we weren't going to be drilling for oil. And so we have so much oil coming down from Canada that our refineries utilize. And quite frankly, if we were to switch to Permian crude, we wouldn't have as much diesel. We wouldn't be generating as much diesel, for example, because the heavy sour stuff, you get more volume. You got all these interconnections what do they call those dudes who run the provinces?
Premiers.
Premier Ford is threatening to cut off the electricity, right? Because of all those interconnections. And then lastly, with our exports of natural gas and others to Mexico, we don't really have a lot of wiggle room, if you will, on the issue of energy with respect to tariffs, especially with Canada and Mexico. I'm not saying that they shouldn't do all kinds of sanctions when it makes sense, Venezuela, Iraq, and things like that. But I do think that President Trump recognizes that energy is a different ballgame, because he has again repeated in the second round here of the trade war with Canada and Mexico that he's differentiated energy and cut it down to 10%. But we're advising and urging them to take the next step and just wall it off and exclude it from any of this tariff discussion.
Yeah, that makes us different from other industries in approximately no way.
Yeah, you're probably right, but I think ours is a little bit more intricate, and also
everybody thinks their argument's better,
but also more directly impactful in terms of the folks, people who fill their gas tanks and things like that. So
yeah, that's true. It's been a while since I used plastic or chemicals or steel. Go ahead.
That's it. That's my pitch. Well, the question is, are they working? This is from the New York Post. Honda moves Civic production plans to Indiana from Mexico to avoid Trump's tariffs. As Canada and Mexico brace for a second round of 25% tariffs on Tuesday, Honda became one of the first companies to cave, scrapping plans to produce its new Civic in Mexico in favor of Indiana, according to a report. The Japanese auto giant had initially planned to manufacture the next generation Civic in Guanajuato, Mexico, starting in November 27. Sources familiar with the matter told Reuters. Now, Honda plans to manufacture the new Civic in Indiana, churning out 210,000 vehicles a year, a source told the outlet.
Yeah, so in general on this stuff, there are a lot of, this is kind of what I was alluding to before, that there are different claims that could be made on behalf of it. And you're right, like some of the free market guys that 10 years ago would have been just total free traders now are having to come in and, bob and weave a little bit. So like, for example, to say, oh no, this is just, Trump's just kind of bluffing. He's just doing this sort of like to talk them down to get reciprocation and so forth. If that's the goal, well, then it's not going to raise revenue, right? Like if it's just kind of like, oh, we're going to slap this on and just scare the crap out of them and then we'll roll it back. Well, then, you're not going to be able to cut income taxes then. A thing like this, I realize it would be hard, if Trump's talking to a bunch of people and they're applauding that, for me to get up there as an economist and go, well, actually, but in general, when they were doing the green energy stuff and pointing, look at all the jobs it was creating, we were saying, well, I don't want people in Washington setting policy to, we create jobs here. Well, then that's just sucking workers from over here. So there is all that element. So I would like to say just to come up with a coherent trade policy and to say, hey, we need revenue. Let's have tariffs like this and income tax like this and such. And then given the new rules, let the jobs be created where they're supposed to be created, as opposed to, pointing to one particular thing because of a rule change and saying, oh, that's obviously a good thing.
So if you're going to do it and just set it and forget it. Or are you suggesting that the way that the Trump administration is handling it, we're going to have tariffs tomorrow? No, I guess I'll change it to Friday. Yeah, maybe we could go. We can maybe do something Thursday, right? Like the whole uncertainty part of it is
right. Like kind of like what Mike was alluding to there a minute ago, is that, if people that their business depends on importing raw materials and then using them to make stuff, like this is, they want to just know what's the policy going to be, We used to talk about regulatory certainty. That was a big thing that we used to talk about a lot. So I'm just saying it happens here too. And right. I think there are valid things going on in Trump's, a lot of the things they're pointing to in terms of look at what these other people are doing and we're kind of getting screwed. I think there's a lot of truth in what they're saying, but for me, I would much prefer, if they just laid out a comprehensive strategy, said this is what we're doing, and everyone could make plans accordingly instead of, hey, what are tariffs going to be next week? Who knows?
Yeah, it's not going to happen. We can be certain of. So anyways, the freshman senator from Michigan gave the Democratic response.
Did you listen to that thing?
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
I didn't see who had like any patience. Who had any patience to listen to that after listening to the first speech?
Yeah, I was yawning, but I think it should have been Senator Fetterman, quite frankly. He tweeted this morning, including an article from Politico, giving bingo Democrats' silent protest against Trump falls flat. A sad cavalcade of owns and unhinged petulance. It only makes Trump look more presidential and restrained. We're becoming the metaphorical car alarms that nobody pays attention to. Might not be a winning message. That was Fetterman, or at least his Twitter guy.
Yeah, I think you understand why he wasn't invited to give the rebuttal.
So, all right, enough about him. But speaking of taxes, I want to bring this up in particular. I'm interested in Bob's thoughts on this. This is from the great governor of Florida.
Subject their citizens to higher taxes, such as higher property taxes, to pay for these spending habits. And, these property taxes, it's like you buy a home, you buy land, maybe you buy the home outright, but maybe you pay off a mortgage over 30 years. And then, okay, you've paid off the mortgage, you bought the land, you've been taxed many times. It's like, is it your property or not? Just for being on your property, you got to write a check to the government every year. So you're basically paying rent to the government to live on your own property. And our homestead exemption is not strong enough to help these folks because the property gets assessed so high. And that's the thing. If you buy a home for $300,000 and there's certain tax, well, then what? 10 years later, they say it's worth $700,000. And so, and they say, there's homestead stuff that helps protect you to a certain extent, but you're paying more. And a lot of people can't afford that. So I think that that's a big issue. And I know we're going to be really looking at ways to bring people relief from that, because I think it's been really something that's pinching a lot of homeowners, particularly seniors on fixed income. But the reality is people have seen, and this is not the state, we don't control this, we've not allowed any of that stuff to happen. We've been cutting taxes, but people have seen their property tax liability go up over these last years because the property is being assessed higher and higher. And the reality is you don't really know how much your home is worth until someone offers you money and is willing to pull the trigger on a sale. That's how a market works. You can say it's worth this much, but if no one's willing to come and offer you that much, then why should you pay taxes on that amount? And so there's a lot of things that need to be done with that.
Anyway, he goes on for far too long as usual, but DeSantis is now making the case to rid us of the scourge of property taxes.
I mean, I like all tax cuts, so I'm in favor of it. I understand the thing about like you're renting it from the government. I guess the thing is you could say that about anything, like income tax. Like, are we the government's slaves? How come, why do I owe them a piece of money, just out of my wages? So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that argument, but I don't think there's anything particularly odious about a property tax that you couldn't also apply to, taxing income and other things. But yeah, I own a house in Florida and I hope they lower the property taxes.
Actually, I'm all for lowering the property taxes for those of us who live in the home. So.
Really?
Yeah. They can tax all you vacation people like Mike's got his McMansions up in Emerald Isle. So,
well, what if I intended to live in it and then things changed? So I think I should get at least half of my money back.
You get an intentional tax break.
What I want to know is if they get rid of property taxes in Florida, first of all, sign me up. But where are they going to get revenue? Or maybe that's the point.
I mean, is there law enforcement in Florida anyhow, or is it just
That's a good point. Although I don't know how I have to do more research. I don't know how much of our property taxes. I wonder if our property taxes go to Tallahassee. Any of them?
I mean, that's kind of what I was wondering because I'm not familiar with what he was proposing. That I think most of what I pay is not collected by the state.
All right, this one's a little complicated, and I want to have Mike. I want to have you set it up because you brought it to my attention, and this is right up Bob's alley.
It doesn't mean I read it, Tom. Just so you know.
The Fort Knox mystery revealed.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, did you read this?
I didn't read it. No.
Oh, good Lord.
Right, so we've been harping on. We've been doing this, teasing out this Fort Knox thing like Al Capone's vaults for like weeks now, right? Mike's figured it out. He's got a buddy who sent over a missive. Speculations from Bloomberg. Speculation is swirling that the U.S. will revalue its gold reserves to fund the purchase of crypto.
Mm-hmm.
While not a base case, that possibility should be taken seriously, given the potential knock-on effects on the Federal Reserve's independence, inflation expectations, the gold market, and the reserve status of the dollar. As if tariffs were not enough for the market to digest, at the weekend, President Trump announced a strategic reserve fund for crypto that will include Bitcoin, Ether, and three smaller tokens. But he left the question of how crypto will be purchased unanswered. That leaves open the possibility of a reevaluation in the U.S. gold reserves.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could read it, but I didn't understand hardly any of it.
Okay, yeah, all right. So I can speak a little bit to that. So one thing is, just so people understand the accounting. So, after originally World War I days, gold, it was $20.67 an ounce, right? And anybody could go into the government and hand them $20.67 to get an ounce of gold, right? And that's what kind of kept them honest. They couldn't print too many dollars. And then FDR comes in, seizes everybody's gold, and that's what people call, we left the gold standard. It was that you went to prison for 10 years if you didn't hand your gold over. And then he revalued to $35 an ounce. And that's what it was all through Bretton Woods. And then at some point, I think under the Nixon administration, right when he, went off the gold standard in 71, it was $42 and change, something like that. So that's how it's been carried on their books, right? So the government still thinks, they show on their books as assets, they're carrying all this gold, like 8,000 tons or something, but it's valued at a book value of $42 an ounce. So obviously the market value is higher. So that's what people are talking about when they say, why don't we revalue it? So it's like, in terms of officially how much gold is the government sitting on, it's a much bigger number if they just marked it to market, basically. And then the idea is they also independently, want to start buying crypto and, Bitcoin and Ether and other things you're talking about. And so the idea is, instead of like going and taxing people, it's like we're just rebalancing the portfolio, right? Just like if you were a portfolio and you had a bunch of gold, you could sell off some of that and then get other things. And it's just, so you're limiting your exposure just to that one asset. So it's, hey, it's not a net burden on the taxpayer. We're just kind of acknowledging a reality that the role gold used to serve in the international financial markets, now Bitcoin is starting to, grow into that as well. So why don't we so that's the idea. The part that I still don't get, and I've been talking to people, is they're trying to make it sound like we don't need to sell any of the gold. We can just have the Fed do so. Like the Fed can just acknowledge all these new gold holdings because we're revaluing it, marking to market. And that gives us all this extra hundreds of billions to go buy Bitcoin without it being inflationary. So that doesn't make sense to me, that to get people to sell their Bitcoin to the government, they're going to need to get dollars in their bank account. Otherwise, why are they doing it? And just by changing on the accounting, how much we're listing the gold's value on our asset side, that doesn't create new dollars. So I think they're fooling themselves if they think there's a way they can do it without causing without selling the gold. So my suggestion would be, if you want to sell off some of that gold and then roll it over to Bitcoin. And my thing was, why not sell off some of the student loans? I mean, you would have to sell them at a huge discount because a lot of them aren't performing. But I like the idea of selling off assets so you're not taxing people and it's not, increasing the deficit to get, if you're going to do a strategic Bitcoin reserve. But that one last part where they're trying to make it sound like this won't even cause inflation and we don't even have to get rid of our gold, I don't see how that works.
Yeah, and so is that sort of the concept of the Lummis bill, the Bitcoin Act of 2024?
So her bill was definitely to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and how much they were going to accumulate, and then they were going to just, try to lockbox it to just use debt reduction. I don't know if they specified. They have different ideas for how they're going to fund it. I don't know if in the previous one if they were if they left that open ended or not, but I'm talking with people from their office, and that's the stuff you're talking about is all being bounced around in terms of let's try to nail this down.
Yeah, so the article goes on to say the most immediate problem arising from a gold reevaluation, however, would be in that market itself. The last time a U.S. president revalued gold in 1933, there was no futures market. If, as I suspect, a gold revaluation creates a squeeze in the physical metal, it would leave those short the futures scrabbling to find metal to deliver while the price keeps rising.
So, okay, so I'll explain what the claim is there. So they're saying that if the government were to do that, that would raise the U.S. dollar price of gold, just like back in the 30s when FDR did it. Gold went from $20.67 an ounce to $35 an ounce. So they're saying, oh, if that happens this time, people right now who are short are going to get squeezed. I disagree with that, though, because everybody knows gold's not worth $42 an ounce. You know what I mean? In other words, they're not forcing it. Whereas under FDR, he was inflating, right? So it's totally different here. It's not, the U.S. government's not using its guns to get anybody to do anything they don't want to do. All they're doing is saying, yeah, this gold we're sitting on, like they claim is sitting in Fort Knox and the New York Fed. Right now, we've been valuing in our books at $42. We're going to do something more realistic. So them acknowledging in reality, I don't see how that changes the global price of gold.
You know what Warren Buffett used to say? Warren Buffett used to say that if you don't understand something, you shouldn't invest in it.
Yeah, well, clearly,
if I asked 100 Americans to explain to me Bitcoin, I guarantee you 99 of them couldn't give me anything remotely close.
Well, one guy in the room can give you an answer.
If you notice, he probably doesn't get paid in Bitcoin. he gets paid in cash like everybody else in America. All this nonsense about we're going to have a Bitcoin reserve. What can you buy with Bitcoin? What? Can you buy food? Can you buy guns? Can you buy concertina, land, cows? This is where we're starting to grow tulips here. This is what's going on. He'll explain the tulips reference.
You don't need to explain it. Our audience understands the tulips. But what do you got, Bob? Let's close that out.
Okay, yeah, sure. So it is controversial, definitely. And then the other sort of open Pandora's box that people were saying, okay, yeah, maybe Bitcoin makes sense. And then they tweeted out, what was it, like 2 weeks ago, about, oh yeah, we're going to get XRP and some other Solana, like things that are
even
crypto,
shadier. Even shadier.
In the vernacular, they call them poop coins, but they use a harder word.
Yeah.
And so that's, again, there is a slippery slope there where it does look like, oh, is this just a slush fund? For the same reason you wouldn't want to just have the government buying stocks, that you could see how, that opens the door to corruption, even though there are sovereign wealth funds.
Whatever do you mean?
Yeah. I know.
You mean a sovereign wealth fund wouldn't be on the up and up?
Yeah, I know.
I would just say one thing. At least we now know all this nonsense talk about going to Fort Knox to see if the gold's still there. We have an answer to that finally.
It was like the last thing he was briefed on before he went on that press gaggle, right?
Yeah.
He totally ignored everyone else's question. Did you know we're going to Fort Knox? We're going to find the gold. We're going to see what's in there. If there is gold, I don't know. We're going to see.
but yeah, so I think I'm more sympathetic to Bitcoin than Mike is. But yeah, I think it's possible 10 years from now, Bitcoin's going to be a much bigger deal in the financial markets than it is now. So the argument is, why don't we get ahead of that? But
just like
I understand
the AI race, right? All right, let's move on. This one's right up Bob's alley. This is from Reuters. Atlanta Fed shock sounds Trumpcession warning. The Atlanta Fed's GDP model estimates a significant decline in U.S. GDP growth, potentially signaling a recession. This negative outlook is attributed to soft economic indicators, including weak sentiment surveys and declining retail sales, as well as uncertainty surrounding President Trump's agenda, particularly on trade, which we talked about. While the Fed's rate cutting cycle is currently on hold, and impending Trumpcession is now a concern for policymakers. However, when the article did emphasize that the Atlanta Fed number is an outlier for now. The New York Fed's equivalent nowcast real-time tracking models was updated on Friday to 2.9% annualized growth from Q1 and from 3. And the Dallas Fed's weekly index, which doesn't include the most recent data, was showing 2.4% in February. So Atlanta says negative 2.8 outlier.
Yeah. So some more of the context there. Partly why that was so surprising is it was like in the course of, I want to say like 2 weeks that, like they're called like the GDP now or Fed now forecast. Like, so it's supposed to be real time, with all the best available information. Bam. What do you say for, first quarter GDP? And like I said, in the course of like 2 weeks, it went from modest growth to contraction, recession. And so people who don't like Trump were like, aha, see, as soon as the guy comes in and does his stuff, look at what happens. Different, like you're saying, Tom, part of it is, well, there's other ones that aren't saying that. In general, with the inverted yield curve, I have thought, yeah, I mean, if you took that as an indicator that in this year, there's probably going to be a recession, like, down the road, looking back, they're going to say it started in this year, that would totally fit in the, historical patterns, just given the yield. We had nothing to do with Trump. And then also, and this might be on your radar, how Elon Musk for a while on social media was talking about government spending shouldn't be in GDP. This is where that's coming from, because I think partly why the Atlanta Fed did that is with all the ostensible spending cuts that might be in store because of Doge. And Mike would say, no, they're not. But suppose they did actually cut a bunch of government spending, automatically that makes GDP go down. And so Elon's point was, if you're paying workers to go do nonsense jobs that don't help anybody, okay, official GDP can go down, but that's actually, freeing them up to go do something useful. So to the extent that official GDP goes down for that reason, that I'm all for it, and that doesn't mean anything in terms of actual human beings' welfare. But the tariff stuff, yeah, that could certainly disrupt trade and cause a recession.
So where are you on the recession meter personally?
Me, I think they might not know in real time, right? Because this stuff, it's always, they have to wait till the data comes in looking backwards. But yeah, I think down the road, the official tracking of when do recessions start and end, I think there will be a recession that they say starts in 2025. If Trump has good policies, I think it could be, we'll bounce back and get through it. But I think that's just with the way the Fed was, having interest rates really low and then raising them. Like it would be surprising if we didn't have a recession.
Yeah, some say we were in a recession under Biden, although they fudged the numbers and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I understand, and there are a lot of number fudging that they did, but on the other hand, for how much they whipsawed rates around, I would be surprised if there could have been a recession and some of us weren't sure it happened. Like, to me, I would have thought, no, it's going to be bad. Well, it might be short, I hope, but it'll be intense.
All right, Mike, anything
on what? On this?
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
You are never speechless, Mike.
I'm a little concerned that the Commerce Secretary doesn't understand the product he puts out, because he said, hey, we should separate out government expenditures. I'm like, dude, the table that you put out already does. Maybe that could, say it literally right there. It's one of the rows, right? You're just like, are you sure you're running this thing?
Well, speaking of Doge, this is from CNN. Not so fast, says SCOTUS. Supreme Court rejects Trump's request to keep billions in foreign aid frozen. The divided Supreme Court on Wednesday rejected the Trump administration's request to keep the USAID funds bottled up. However, the court did not immediately say when the money must be released, allowing the White House to continue to dispute the issue in lower courts. The ruling was 5-4. Order was unsigned, but 4 conservative justices dissented: Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh. That put Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts lumped in with the liberals on the court. And I read the order. I read the dissent. Alito was hopping mad about this. Not happy. So.
I mean, I thought it was a pretty typical Supreme Court decision, right? They sent it back to the lower court and said, you're going to have to define this thing a little bit better for us. Yeah. Court now. You're gonna have to, you're gonna have to explain to us, like, at what point do you figure the administration's being intentionally obstructive, that kind of thing, right? I thought it was a kick the can down the road. I'm super sorry that Justice Alito wasn't happy.
So anyway, so talking about spending cuts and Doge, if we can't get rid of the $2 billion in USAID, I'm not sure we're gonna be seeing hundreds of billions of dollars being cut.
If only somebody had made this point before on this show.
But Tom Massey had a nice comment about this. The solution to this problem is obvious. Congress must quit sending the damn money to USAID. Republicans control the House and Senate, yet here we are facing a vote on a continuing resolution next week that would fund everything in 2025 as it was funded in 2024.
He's not wrong, is he?
No, he's not.
You don't like the Supreme Court? I got an answer for you. You can go to Congress and get them to vote for stuff.
Yeah, that would be a refreshing change.
Regular order. Where
do you think we're going on Doge, Bob? Are we going to get some cuts or what?
I mean, not to be cliched or anything, but I think you guys are just summarizing the issue that they can go through, and people were wondering the legal authority to do that. Certain things, yeah, maybe they can do it, maybe they can't, but ultimately, right, it's if Congress is authorizing the spending, it is a bit awkward then if the executive say, well, we're not going to spend that money. That is clearly what would make the most sense is if they identify those things, and if they really are ridiculous, put the people in Congress back on their heels and say, oh, so you're in favor of, beekeepers studying transgenderism in, Mozambique or something. And, they're see who votes yes for it, but it looks like lots of people don't want to vote no.
Lies, Bob.
What do I always say?
The Democrats will tell you they're lies.
What do I always say? Every dollar the federal government spends was put there by somebody intentionally. None of them are accidents.
What about the Doge dividend? What would it be?
About $10. Assuming
I assume that's not going to be inflationary then.
$10. $10 per. It's a pizza for everybody, basically. And that's assuming it's really the number they say it is, and who the hell knows, right?
All right. Let's move on to energy, unless we have any more on the.
Yeah. So my take on that stuff. So you're right. That is it going to be what it is, but suppose Doge did come up with whatever, 800 billion in saving, whatever Elon was saying they thought they were going to do. I was going out and there were a lot of libertarian free market types who were saying, wait a minute, how could you possibly give that as a dividend? Didn't we just get through yelling at Biden for the stimmies? But I think there is a qualitative difference that if suppose they really did cut spending, then the deficit would have been lower. And if instead they, send rebates to taxpayers, which the proposal was, it wasn't just a straight stimulus check. It was a refund of some of your tax payments is the way they were couching it. Then that wouldn't be any more inflationary than the status quo would have been. Whereas the Obama stimulus checks, clearly that was making the deficit higher than it otherwise would have been. So whether it's a good idea or not, I think, compared to the counterfactual, it's not more inflationary to give taxpayers some money back.
Yeah, we had Kevin Hassett give a lecture to the White House reporters on this issue, and basically echoed that. It was basically it's apples to oranges. So
it's also pennies. I would note one thing that's getting me increasingly concerned, and that is our new leader from South Africa is running around circling federal judges. Meaning he's saying we should impeach them for having the nerve to be federal judges. Basically, I'm sympathetic, having spent my entire life listening to federal judges get in the middle of stuff they had no business getting in the middle of. But the rhetoric's starting to get a little hot.
Yeah, kind of like the Schumer deal, right? Where he.
Yeah, and when Schumer did it, I called him out on it too.
Yeah, that's what we do here at the Unregulated podcast.
Yeah,
call them all out.
We call them all out.
We're working our way out of Washington. All right, here's one from Energy World. This is from the Straits Times. The headline is Europe to protect auto sector from mortal danger. Europe's car makers are in mortal danger, EU industry chief Stephanie Sojourn warned as the bloc launched a much vaunted plan on March 5th to rescue its auto sector. The sector is the jewel in Europe's industrial crown, employing around 13 million people and contributing some 7% to the European Union's economy. But with factory closures in Europe and U.S. President Trump's tariffs threatening to upend the global trading system, the industry faces rising risks and has demanded Brussels act urgently. The project includes boosting demand for EVs. Have you heard this before? By accelerating uptake in corporate fleets and providing more support for made-in-Europe batteries. The European Commission is letting go of its naivete, protecting the sector, giving it the opportunity to become competitive. And then it goes on to talk about mandating that fleets be EV purchases. And of course, the part that they buried was that they want content requirements. So in essence, what the article boils down to is they still have not learned. They still are consider this as helping tackle climate change as the cornerstone of its policies in recent years, including the phasing out of burning of fossil fuel, and that they're worried that China is crushing them with market share. So
that sounds sad. I feel bad for them. I really do.
All right, we got not so sunny days for Sunnova.
Have they declared bankruptcy today?
Not yet. This is from Bloomberg. Sunnova's 71% stock plunge heralds U.S. solar state of chaos. Sunnova Energy International shares plunged 71% as the company warned there is substantial doubt it will remain in business. That came less than a week after First Solar, the biggest U.S. solar manufacturer, said it was seeing increasing customer delays. And it was also on the heels of Sunrun Inc., the biggest U.S. residential solar company, saying it expects installation volumes to fall flat this year. So solar, the future of our energy production doesn't seem so bright.
I mean, I think just stories are related, right? That how long have they've been? I feel like I'm back in the saddle.
I know that's why I got you on, man.
Yeah, 15 years ago.
Nothing ever changes here at
IRA. This is Obama's, clean energy czar and that physics whiz kid, and they were, all that stuff. So central planning doesn't work, and also too with this stuff. Yeah, if you could get the entire advanced economies of the world all on board, or they all had the same policy, yeah, you could fake it. But if a few big countries aren't going along, then what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I think the main problem is a physics problem. This stuff just doesn't work as well, and no matter what you do to prop it up, everything eventually it all catches up to them, right?
Yeah, and it was always the fine line they were trying to thread, if you remember, like every time they were going to let the production tax credit expire, all the wind, lobby groups or whatever they call these infographics just showing the absolute catastrophe. And then they were also saying, and this is the wave of the future. Like this is, humanity is going to just run on this, and don't listen to the naysayers. This stuff is so awesome. And it was like, well, which is it? You know what I mean? Like the thing's survival depends on a production tax credit, or this is like Star Trek technology. And this, you know what I mean? Like Henry Ford, they didn't need to have, a manure tax to switch over to, the combustion engine.
Yeah, that was my favorite chart, because every time the renewables guys brought it up and said, look what happens when we run out of when we let the production tax cut expire. It's installations crater to zero. I'm like, well, you're making our case for us.
Yeah, I did the screen capture and had the little PNG and sent it over to our guy to just show that, so they're making the case for us. This is great. They even had pretty graphics.
So along those lines, oilprice.com, hedge fund claims clean energy sector is dead for now. There is currently no money to be made from things like wind and solar. A hedge fund set up specifically to profit from that niche has concluded. The whole sector, solar, wind, hydrogen, fuel cells, anything clean is dead for now. Nishant Gupta, the founder of the UK-based Canal Capital, told Bloomberg hours after one of the largest solar energy players in the US warned it has doubts about its state as a going concern. The fundamentals are very poor. Gupta, who manages some 100 million, told Bloomberg. And I'm not talking about long term. I'm talking about where I see a weakness right now. The hedge fund executive added, however, that the long-term outlook for the transition remains bullish, with investments in transition technology expected to increase substantially by the end of the decade. So
the end of which decade?
Yeah.
We're already midway through this decade.
So the charade continues. It's like, oh, well, it doesn't work now, but it's right around the corner. It's inevitable.
The guy probably figured out halfway through the interview that, like, wait a minute, I'm going to have a bunch of exit for my own fund.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
just real quick on that too, Tom, the irony with that is, coming at it as an economist, and to be clear, the standard economists would say, oh, there's a negative externality from climate change, and that's why, but even on their own terms, if you stipulate all that for sake of argument, the policy's not specific funding, tax credits for particular technologies, then the argument's just, okay, have a carbon tax and then let the market solve it. You know what I mean? So they didn't even, these policies don't even match their own ostensible worldview. It's just, things that they're in the same zip code. And so, they'll go ahead and we'll justify this with that when it doesn't even follow from their own argument.
Yeah. And I mean, I come at it from a different point of view, not that I disagree. I don't, but, I wonder what's going to happen when we do start to see bankruptcies in the sector, and we're going to, right? I wonder, is this going to be subject to some kind of an attempt to save them in Congress?
I mean, if it happens in this Congress, then I'm done. I'm finished. I'm gonna go.
I may not make that kind of Sherman-esque statement at the moment if I were you.
I mean, if we, with this president, if we bail out solar.
Well, think about the backdrop for a second, right? We spin into this recession, and these guys, the first victims of the recession are all these alternative energy companies, right? And they're, half of them are sitting there on federal grant money or federal loan money or both. So,
that we're on the hook for.
Yeah, that we're on the hook for. Can you imagine a world in which one of the softer elements of the Trump administration, convinces the boss that, hey, we got to go rescue these guys?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a high bar, but I agree. It's a possibility.
It's something I've been thinking about ever since that Sunnova story. I was like, what happens? Because it's not going to happen in ones. It's going to happen in 3s and 6s and 8s, right? Lots of people are going to go under all at once.
Yeah, we just read a list of at least 3. So.
Yeah.
Is there any way they would spin it to be like a national security thing?
Of course.
I mean, that's how they would have to
do it. Of course. And, if you think about it, half of these guys' customers are now probably data centers. So, Amazon shows up at your doorstep and says, hey, man, you got to save these guys because I need their solar panels. It has a high potential to get messy. It really does.
It does. Yeah, you're right. So anyway, I wanted to give a nod to Bob because you were one of the first economists. You stuck your neck out on a lot of these issues way back in the day. I appreciated all the work you did for us and with us in those years. You and Roger Pilkey Jr. were the only two from different professions that basically said all of these policies are going to be more harmful than climate change itself.
Yeah, let me tell my favorite. So thank you for that. And Rob Bradley was the one that kind of told me this is going to be huge. You want to start specializing in this stuff. My favorite anecdote from all that is William Nordhaus. The same. This all happened the same weekend. William Nordhaus is announced as the Economic Nobel Memorial Prize for his work on climate change, and the UN's special report on 1.5 degrees C of global warming comes out same weekend. Nordhaus's own model that he just won the Nobel Prize for showed 1.5 degrees Celsius cap is so draconian and so insane that yes, it would be better for humanity to do nothing than to strive for that crazy goal. And all the New York Times interviewing him and saying, "Do you think we can achieve the 1.5 C?" And he said, "No, I don't think we have time. I think it's too late." And thank God he didn't add that part. Up till then I had just given him the benefit of the doubt, and then I was like, "Oh, come on, give me a break." And nobody mentions those. They were reported in the same stories as if they were complementary things when no, actually, this guy's own work shows the UN's insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not that I'm endorsing his work, but I'm just saying, just the juxtaposition that how crazy. So another thing is, when I started working for you guys and talking about this stuff, people were talking about, follow the science. And at that point, all the economic literature stuff counted as the science. And I'm not saying it's all me, but as I started saying, no, actually, it's very modest. And the most you could do is a carbon tax, blah, blah, blah. And what you activists wants, wait. Then all of a sudden it was like, and Nordhaus, this crazy like after a while, Nordhaus was no longer part of the science because they realized he's not going to give us what we want. And so he got thrown. You know what I mean? Like there was a brief window where they liked him.
Not even the Nobel Prize is enough to save you.
Right. So anyway, it was just interesting how much they kept moving the goalposts when they realized this isn't going to give us the juice we want.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I'll give you compliments as well, is all your work on carbon taxes generally were tremendously impactful in keeping the Republicans as far away from that as possible. So
did you really just say impactful?
I did. I certainly did.
What kind of hippie have you become? That's not a word. Something that is a word of the left. We don't use it on our side.
Okay, well, I don't disagree, actually.
Actually, I went to Jack Spencer's book thing today at Lou's.
Yeah.
And literally Spencer said that in response to a question, like a little back and forth. Jack said, yeah, I don't disagree. And I'm like, what?
Bob, you probably recall this from your days. Mike and I have a beef with Washington words like "I don't disagree."
Okay. Yeah.
There
was a period where everyone just
agree.
Yeah, right.
Just say
there was a period where everyone kept saying at the end of the day, and I got really sick of that
phrase.
Was
Boehner. That was Boehner. But you got to do it with a cigarette dangling out of your mouth. So. All right. Well, we were briefly saved. We have some sane New Mexican legislators. Key Democrats helped defeat proposed increases to New Mexico oil and gas regulations from a local affiliate, KUNM. A number of proposals aimed at reforming how the oil and gas industry works in New Mexico have stalled out in this year's legislative session. Meanwhile, others that would see the state bring in even more money from its booming production are still afloat. Report from Capitol in Maine, Jerry Redfern has been keeping a close eye on the legislation. Basically, Bob, we reported on this a couple weeks back. The Democrat legislature and the governor there would like to increase royalties on oil and gas production in their own state. The state gets probably 75 to 80% of its revenue from oil and gas royalties and things like that. And they were actually looking to create a royalty rate that would have put a lot of independent producers out of business, and B, most likely would have reduced their revenue in their coffers. So,
and just because they're short-sighted, or because that was the goal?
Well, they it's like Gavin Newsom. They're playing a game of chicken with the industry.
Right.
It's like, how far can you push them before you break them?
Right.
Chevron, a storied company in California, cities and towns were named after their refineries. It got to the point where they're like, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore, and they moved their headquarters to Texas. So
Atlas shrugged.
Yes, indeed. And then I got one more in the energy world, and then we can just BS for a while and then wrap it up. This is from Bloomberg. Mike, how much money did Senator Manchin sell his soul for the Mountain Valley Pipeline?
He got what did it cost the original the scoring on that was $366 billion.
And what's the real number?
About 1.5 trillion.
And that's a low estimate, yeah?
Yeah, I was going to say you run 10 more years, it'll probably go to 3.
Mountain Valley Pipeline LLC can proceed with trespass and tortuous interference claims against a protester who chained himself to the pipeline equipment. But the natural gas company's allegation that the single protester was part of a broader conspiracy fails, since Mountain Valley didn't name any other parties who shared a common plan. Chief Judge Thomas Keel of the U.S. District Court for Northern District of West Virginia wrote on a Monday opinion, Mountain Valley has authorization from the FERC, from Congress, to operate the pipeline from West Virginia to Virginia. And that thing passed when?
2023, right? 2023, yeah.
They're still nowhere near having product flow through this thing.
No, these guys are lousy at building pipelines. The fact that they cut it right in front of Wintergreen's entrance tells you everything you need to know about them. Yeah. Their attention to detail is not good.
No, not in the least. But Governor Manchin, thank you very much, though. We very much appreciate your support of the industry. So.
He's the best. The best.
All right. This is the catch-all portion of the podcast. What did I miss? What do you guys want to talk about?
I want to read a good Ash Wednesday proclamation, but this is Bob's show, not mine.
Oh, I thought you were getting ready to read one.
Oh, you know what? The hell, I'll read it. Look, this is what a good one sounds like.
See, during the show, you pulled up yours.
You're damn right I did. You are damn right I did. For Catholics and many other Christians, Ash Wednesday marks the beginning of the Lenten season that concludes with the joyful celebration of Easter Sunday. Today, millions of Christians will be marked on their foreheads with the sign of the cross. The imposition of ashes is an invitation to spend time during Lent fasting, praying, and engaging in acts of charity. This powerful and sacred tradition reminds us of our shared mortality, Christ's saving love, and the need to repent and accept the gospel more fully. We join in prayer with everyone observing this holy day and wish you a prayerful Lenten journey. May you grow closer to God in your faith during this blessed season. That is an Ash Wednesday message, not, hey, I hope American Catholics have a good day.
Did that run in the Washington Times?
No, I wrote it for the boss back when I was inside.
Oh, okay. Did it get published?
Yeah, of course he signed it. Don't be ridiculous.
Well done, sir. Well done. All right, Bob, take us home. Got anything?
I think it is worth just expressing, and maybe you guys have done this in previous episodes, but to me, how much Trump is doing, it's just astonishing to me that he's done 8 different things, any one of which in a prior administration that would have been the news cycle for 2 months straight. And he's just rapid fire, oh, hey, I'm going to release the JFK files. And that like got 1 day of coverage, because there's so much stuff going on, whether he does it or, I'm just saying, I think we kind of all adapted and now we're just used to this new normal, but he's been doing stuff. And not that I like everything he's doing, but it's things that we would have thought, oh, there's no way any Republican's going to have the balls to do something like that. And he doesn't care. So I am happy about that. And it does seem like he's got a better team around him that they know this is what his agenda is. How can we package this so there's some, rational plan that it seems like it's fulfilling. So I think he's a lot better this time around than the first administration.
Yeah, I'll give you a case in point. On day 1, he pulled us out of Paris. Took quite a while for that to happen the first go round. We spent a lot of capital and mind share on that decision. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's great. I'm looking for a long weekend, though. I'd like a couple days off. So. All right, I'm going to close this out. I've got 2 for the close this go round, just as a example of the, let's say, fallen decorum in our venerable institutions. Here's the first clip.
With no end in sight, the United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense, with no security, with no anything. Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes.
In a post joint address interview from none other than Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett in her take on the situation in Russia.
First of all, thank you for making the back of my head famous. But second of all, if we could do a sequel, if you could tell Donald Trump anything tonight, what would you tell him?
I would tell him to grow a spine and stop being Putin's hoe.
Putin's hoe. This is what it has come to, ladies and gentlemen. Mike is hiding his head in shame.
God almighty. Your United States Congress.
All right. Well, that wraps up the 220th episode of the Unregulated podcast. Thank you once again, Bob Murphy, for joining us for this episode. I look forward to listening to your podcast and following your work. And really appreciate you coming by.
Thanks for having me. It's always good to be back in the belly of the beast here, and it was fun.
Gotcha. All right, we're wrapping it up. Everyone, stay warm. Have a great week. Bob, have a safe drive home.
Have a good and holy run. Namaste.